happen either to our strength or to our economy without that.
The history of this country goes back a little bit before 1945. It goes back 200 years. State schools, universities, were a minor part of the total higher educational system for a long time. That educational system did generate a great many educated and schooled people, a great many people who made great contributions to this country.
What percentage of people went to college before World War II in this country?
The percentage that was going to college was going up and rising. You know, let me tell you another statistic. I hate to introduce statistics, but let me tell you one more thing. Do you know that the percentage of the students at private universities who come from low-income classes is higher than the percentage of students at state universities, at government universities that come from the lowest income classes?
Yes, they're there with government assistance.
Most cases
they're there with government assistance, which in many cases favors the privates as against the public schools.
In most cases, they're there with private scholarships that have been contributed by people, which is all to the good.
Dr. Enrico,
we come back to the point that I tried to make earlier with Dartmouth. The reason the public higher education system developed, the reason that you have the UCLAs and others is not simply that government went amok or bureaucrats went that way, but because 8 of those students were not getting into Dartmouth, and there was not a place for them. And it was public higher education that opened up its doors to those students. Those are the youngsters that now have an opportunity they wouldn't have had before. I think on the issue of loans, that it's as with all complex human tasks, it's not an either-or situation. You need a mix of strategies. I think you need a mix of strategies on the issue of alternatives for youngsters in schools. I think you can have, as indeed you do have, alternatives within public school systems. I think you can have alternatives within schools. I think you can have competition through open enrollment kinds of arrangements. I am fearful, however, always, for those 8 youngsters that can't get in to something which is basically selective and exclusive. If you can assure us that those 8 youngsters all will be provided with equal attention, equal opportunity, and equal rights, then I would begin to be more interested in the alternative.
But I want to suggest to you that we're not proposing, neither Jack Koons nor I, to dismantle anything. We're only saying put up or shut up. Either show that you can produce the kind of education people are willing to go and get, or reduce your size, go out of business. We are only proposing that there be a wider range of alternatives. Now, it is not true. Now, let me put a different point to you. There are a small minority of people who are problems. Is it desirable to impose a straitjacket on 100% of the people or 90% of the people in order to provide special assistance or special help to 4 or 5 or 10% of the people? Not at all. I think that there's a big difference between 2 kinds of systems. One kind of system in which the great bulk of parents have effective freedom to choose the kind of schools their children go to, whether at the lower or the higher level. And there are programs and provision for a small minority. That's one kind of a system. That isn't what we have now. What people in the public school system, people like yourself, do, they do not want to give up the monopoly of the public school system any more than the post office wants to give up the monopoly of delivering mail.
Well, I think you attribute the monopoly desire to the bureaucrat. And I don't think that's right. The concern of the public school is for being sure that every youngster in this country gets access to a public education.
Excuse me, you have had an attempt to introduce voucher experiments around the country. Every one of those attempts, as at Alum Rock and elsewhere, has been prevented by the opposition of the educational bureaucracy.
Oh, but no, you can't. That's a glittering generality.
That was true in New Hampshire. It was true in Connecticut.
It's not true in Alum Rock, because Alum Rock was not what you might call a voucher system. It was a kind of a system of free choice within public schools. All right. And whereas one school did better in its scores, others did worse, and when you measured the whole system, when it was all over, the scores were exactly the same as they were before, except that some students had moved to other schools and the grades were better in one school as against another. We do very strongly oppose a voucher system which will end up with public schools being abandoned and thereby destroyed largely. They will become the schools for those who can't get in anywhere else or who are expelled elsewhere.
So if
because if you compel public schools to educate all children, including the most difficult, and if you have other schools
which have... It isn't compelling public schools, it's compelling parents.
No, it's public schools. The public school cannot say to a parent, your child is very difficult, your child throws things, your child screams and yells, your child takes all the attention of the teacher, therefore get out and go find a private school. On the other hand, you have hundreds of private schools in this country where when they get a very disturbed child, they will out that child goes, and where does that child go? The public schools must take them.
But look at the
and
others.
that's what we have. We have one system of schools which cream and which throw out the most difficult. You know, it would be like a hospital throwing out all the sick patients and keeping the healthy ones.
Well, there we leave this week's discussion.
But look at the other side of
I
your
hope you'll join us for the next episode of Free to Choose.
Should consumer protection agencies have the right to decide for us what we eat and drink and wear? Should government bureaucrats have the power to rule on what medicines doctors are allowed to prescribe? Or should we all be free to decide for ourselves? Don't miss Free to Choose next week.
This is the code that the system uses, right?